Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome to episode 150 of What a Piece of Junk, the Star Wars podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. I am your host, Scott Botman, and joining me on the sesquicentennial part of the show is Mr. Derrick Marsh. Derrick, how's it going?
Getting okay. It's episode 150. Couldn't miss this episode. And appreciate everyone rescheduling from last week since we didn't do an episode for last week because I had the space crud known as COVID.
It was
I was
pretty
out
rough.
of commission. So, on the mend now and getting better. Still might have a little irritating cough here and there. I may mute myself from time to time. But otherwise, I am here to talk Acolyte, and we've got 2 episodes to get caught up today. So.
That's right, because we didn't record last week because in addition to your space virus, Mr. Miracle was also a little bit worn out from his weekend activities, and I was recovering from having to see that much of Darth Qimir, because, man, I didn't want to have to see all of that. But also back on the mend and ready with all of his fully energized Wookiee power is our very own gooey chewy Mr. Miracle, Dave Filcloney, man of 1,000 nicknames, Nathan Miracle.
Hello there, and I'm not promising that my mind has not been taken over by a bunch of witches.
Indeed, but isn't that always the case? Hey, but we're going to have a little bit of dark side balance here because joining us for this extra special 150th episode is friend of the show, Lee Fillingsness, Mr. Darth Handsome himself. Lee, how's it going, man?
Not too bad. Just getting over the bad weather here in Minneapolis. It's been crazy the last 24 hours.
Yeah, it's been a rough weekend all across the United States for a variety of reasons, but we are going to focus on the galaxy far, far away to help take our minds off of it. And Lee, we're glad you're here so that you can help us analyze the action scenes of The Acolyte, as you often do. For those who don't know, Lee is an infrequent guest on our show, but co-host of Blood of Kings, the Highlander podcast here on FPN. But he's also a stuntman and fight choreographer in his own right in the film industry. So we're very happy to have him here to talk about a Wookiee lightsaber fight when we get into our section about Star Wars The Acolyte episode 6 choice. I'm sorry, episode 7 choice. But first, we're going to talk about episode 6, which was Teach/Corrupt. Guys, we returned to our naming convention where we have something/something for episode 6, and it was supposedly showing us the differences between the dark side corrupting followers and the light side, hopefully, teaching followers. But we may have been able to see how there's a little bit of a mixing of the two or pushing of the boundaries in this episode as Darth Qimir and Saul sort of seem to do both of each of those things in certain instances when it comes to May or Osha. And of course, this episode was the one where the twins got to swap places, and so it was Osha being instructed or corrupted or just manipulated by Darth Qimir, and then May, of course, dealing with Saul, who basically straps her to the table and says, "I've been waiting for 16 years to give you this lesson, young lady, and you're gonna listen." And then proceeds to not actually tell her before the credits. But that's a whole different thing. I'll save that for question 2. So we'll go with question 1. What did you like best about this episode? Derrick, what did you like best about Teach/Corrupt?
Well, I mean, obviously I didn't want to be sick, but I'm kind of glad we're kind of looping this in with the episode 7, because this episode, out of all the episodes, was probably my least favorite. Because at least with, what was it, episode 4, where they're walking through the forest, we picked on it a bit because not a whole lot happened, but at least we got some really cool scenery. This episode was not so much. The interaction dialogue was clunky. Not to say that it was bad by any means. You know, I've seen worse filmography, but from my perspective, it was definitely an episode that I could at least forget probably out of this whole series. So my favorite part was probably the Basil and Pip interaction, just because it was a lot of fun with them trying to, get Pip going and all this, and Basil trying to, give the clues of, oh, that's not Osha, that's May. So that was a lot of fun interaction and cute little stuff. But yeah, that would probably be about my only thing that I would say was probably my favorite from this episode.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you for the most part. There were parts of this episode that I enjoyed. So I'll go ahead and go next. Lee, I'll bring you back on when it's your time to answer the question. We got a little bit of a crosstalk background noise in your situation there. Unfortunately, Lee is without power because of storms in the area, so he is recording while at the gym. Because when you're a stuntman, you work out like all the time, right? Right, Lee? Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. I would say everybody that works here knows me by name.
Cool. So my favorite thing about Teach/Corrupt was the scenes with Darth Qimir. I know I joked around about seeing a lot of him, or perhaps even a different side of him. But I know, we have to satisfy the female gaze for fans every once in a while. We all have the chainmail bikini that we can fantasize about with Leah's metal bikini there. And also we have, a few other, shall we say, bits of Star Wars cheesecake over the years. So it's probably high time for some more Star Wars beefcake beyond shirtless Kylo Ren, which was not every lady's cup of tea. But I have not yet heard any girls complain about Darth Qimir doing his shirtless scenes. And I thought it was an interesting way for them to deal with him trying to, in this case, literally seduce her to the dark side. So I'm thinking that that's probably the best part of character development as far as a dark side user who is actually a bit of a temptation for May. For Osha. And she is basically having to deal with, a lot of thoughts. And we got a little bit of an echo ahead of time for the whole enemies to lovers trope that was done, of course, with Rey and Kylo Ren in the
Shirtless
trilogy.
Kylo.
Shirtless Kylo. The
Dark
Kylo
side
Ren challenge is,
seduction.
that's right. The Kylo Ren challenge is back. But now it's the Darth Qimir challenge. And so anyway, I thought that it was really cool that they went ahead and did that again. And he did a really great job of, I know she's not going to have the guts to kill me, because, he hands her the lightsaber and basically is daring her to turn it on. And she does, and holds it up to his throat, and then doesn't actually kill him because she realizes that that's what he wants her to do. And so that had sort of echoes of the situation with Palpatine and Rey in The Rise of Skywalker. She can't kill him because that's what he wants her to do, at least not in that way. And so that was definitely my favorite part of the episode, was the way that Darth Qimir was messing with her.
Was it him cooking
Nathan.
soup? I thought it would have been him cooking soup.
Now, I did like to see that he was cooking soup. I loved how... I've got to save that for part 3. I got to save that question 3. Sorry. Nathan.
All right. Well, you talked about the Kylo Ren challenge. I'm more into the Dexter Jetster challenge. That's more my speed. He can also make soup, so we're
That
going
he
with
can.
that.
Sometimes it's even soup of the day.
My favorite part of this episode was definitely the parts with Qimir. Not that I enjoyed seeing, as you mentioned, that much of him, but the idea that we have a dark side force user, potentially a Sith, who is tempting somebody to the dark side and doing so in a way where they're mixing in truth with their own lies, basically. Like, never trust a Sith. They always are trying to deceive you, but usually when a Sith tries to deceive you, they include some element of truth to make you question. They were telling the truth about this, so does that mean everything they were saying is true? And the answer is no, it is not. They are definitely trying to manipulate you, and Qimir is definitely trying to manipulate Osha in this episode. Don't listen to him. But it was well done in the sense that they made it reasonable that she would kind of open up and listen to him and start trying to follow his path. I don't know if she's going to fully commit. We'll find that out next week. But I did like that piece of the episode. And I liked how that setting mirrored Ahch-To. It was not Ahch-To. We think it may be a particular other planet that is being pulled back out of Legends, where Cortosis is mined and is described as having similar features as Ahch-To, but would be a different planet than Ahch-To. And at first I thought, oh man, this is Octo, but then I saw the not porgs and realized, no, this is not it. But it was still neat to see that kind of parallel, and of course we'll bring that back up in question number 3. That's my favorite part of the episode.
Cool. Well, astute viewers will note we've lost Lee. He was running low on power, and he may have lost all power. I did message him to see if we can get him back later in the show to talk choreography and stunt fighting. If not, we'll have him on probably for the finale episode later on this month. But let's move on to question 2, and I'll take this one first. What did you like least about this episode? I did not like the way that Saul was seemingly oblivious to the fact that that was not Osha on his ship. So basically, he had no idea that they had swapped places until Basil helped him figure it out, and then he sort of, I guess he came to that realization because he dealt with his emotional baggage enough to become back aware of things in the Force. But just, I'm like, come on, man, you're a Jedi Knight, you're a Jedi Master, sorry, and you had her as a Padawan for X amount of time. How could you not instantly tell from their auras or whatnot that this is not the same twin? I mean, I know that they're weird creations within the Force somehow, one soul split into 2 bodies, etc., but even that should make it super obvious, because, one of them presents as almost 100% dark, and the other presents as almost 100% light. I mean, yeah, I know the dark side clouds everything. I accept it for narrative reasons, but it strained credulity, in my opinion, that he wouldn't know instantly that that was the other twin. Hey, and we do have Darth Handsome back. Well,
hey, the handsome one's back.
Cool. Lee,
it's
I'll go ahead.
It's a shame that y'all can't see the handsome one.
Can anyone hear me yet?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us? I'm going to go with no. Anyway.
There we are.
Yes, can you hear us now?
Now I can hear you. Sorry,
Excellent.
the Wi-Fi went out here, and I had to go out in my car because my gym is a big concrete box. So I am sitting in a car now.
I see. Okay.
So,
well, we'll go ahead and let
definitely
you
a road
answer.
show, huh?
Yes, a road show indeed. We'll go ahead and let you answer the first 2 questions since you didn't get question 1. So tell us what you liked best about this episode, Teach/Corrupt, and then what you did not like about Teach/Corrupt.
What I liked most about this really was, I think the stuff that it sounded like Mr. Nathan Miracle didn't like as much, the philosophical questions, the slow moments. This really brought me back to one of my favorite moments in the prequel trilogy of Count Dooku kind of trying to corrupt Obi-Wan. Mm-hmm. Because as much as we talk about, like teaching and corrupting, in this case, our Sith or our bad guy with the red lightsaber is telling the truth pretty much the whole time, and it's the Jedi that end up being the liars. And I think the ability to express why they chose the side they did is something that's pretty interesting, especially given the context that we're going to get later on. The part that I liked least about this was Saul being dumber than the little rat guy.
Yeah.
And not being able to figure out, like, oh, I trained this person. I can't see this pretty elaborate scarring on her forehead underneath these little dreadlocks or braids. It took a little bit. And, in the first couple episodes, I was going to be like, she's got the tattoo on her arm, so we know that's Osha, and she's got the forehead scar, so we know that's May. And I thought that was going to come back in a much better way, and it was really didn't even get brought up at all. So kind of lame there.
Yeah, and Saul's inability to sense that she's a different person through the Force is highlighted by the fact that earlier in the series, Qimir knows that Osha is impersonating her sister at the apothecary shop almost instantly. And it's just now that we know that Qimir can use the Force, and he is, essentially a Sith, that makes much more sense. But also, he could just tell from the way that she was talking and acting. You know what I mean? And that just really torpedoes the credibility of Saul's inability to sense things even more so. All right, Derrick, what did you dislike about
All I was
the
going to
episode?
comment was the same thing we talked about before on our last episode. Had they actually done something where it's like, oh, because of them being twins and for whatever uncertainty reason the Jedi don't know, obviously we know now that they were created unnaturally, or at least through a different form than normal, then the idea that they masked their senses, right? Like they were felt like both were the same person. Again, exposition, right? You could have said something earlier on that would have made it unique so that you couldn't tell who was who, right? Because it's no different than complaining about that I'll complain about later in this episode, when May comes running into right as the standoff is happening, and Soul thinks that May is so apparently Soul the entire time is just a blind idiot, right? So let's be honest, because he can't tell the difference between May and Osha since day one. So there's I guess the exposition. But what I really didn't like about this episode, about the main thing I didn't like about it was that really when Qimir just tells Osha, leave, you can leave, go, and she doesn't, I'm just like, okay, whatever. So now she's gonna follow, like, she knows he's bad, he's killed her allies, and she's still gonna listen to this junk. Like, okay, well then obviously then you're tempted by the bad, blah 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 blah. It's like, okay, well then you're not a good person because you're still gonna listen to the villain, give their exposition, or the dialogue to you about why you should join or why I'm doing my cause and stuff like that, and just realizing no, he just killed a bunch of people, and really he's the one who instigated it anyways. So he's a bad person, and she just stays there anyway. So it's like, okay, whatever, this is just more plot armor that we're going to do to move this along. So to me, that was my biggest gripe, was that it's like, okay, everything that she just, the same thing that May's talked about this entire time that we talked about last time too. It's like these characters don't stick to one thing, and that's the upsetting. It's like, okay, are you going to be good or are you going to be bad? And there's not enough in the background for us to really feel like them being pulled either direction. Other than, these are young adults. It's not like they are kids. Had they been, they're going to be in their mid 20s at this point, or even late 20s. Because when were the kids? Like 8? If they were 8, then they make them 24 at least at this point. Like, I'm not saying they're going to make the greatest decisions, but they should at least be a little bit more who they are. And again, that's what I think is upsetting about this, because again, there's a lot of good stuff in this overall story that I want them to do, but I just think it's been inconsistent and lazy writing, that's not giving it out there. And again, they've cut these episodes so short that, again, we're not getting, again, you can spend billions of dollars, Disney, to make your IP give you a return on investment, but you got to spend it. And they're obviously cutting costs or whatever they can do, and then it's just creating non-good story to me right now, because it doesn't make sense consistently from episode to episode. So anyways, that was my biggest gripe.
Yeah, I agree with you a bit on the budgetary constraints, which seems silly when you're talking about a company that kind of owns half the planet with the Walt Disney Company. But at the same time, even they need to be able to prove to their shareholders that they're actually making the most money possible, which is kind of why I'm starting to really hate the stock market, but that's a whole different soapbox. And so the idea here that they would have to make cuts to the budget and they can't show every scene that they would like to, and they can't make the episode as long or as expansive as they would like to, is just laughable almost when you're talking about Star Wars production. And yet, Star Wars has a long history of shoestring production shortcuts. I mean, I won't mention the Star Wars Holiday Special, but let's talk about some Ewok movies back in the 1980s. There were definitely budgetary constraints there, and of course, notoriously, or perhaps famously, in the first Star Wars, A New Hope, they did all kinds of things with shoestring budgets. They had to invent new stuff to do the special effects the way that they wanted to do them. Now,
can I introduce a budgetary theory I have?
Sure, go ahead.
I think George Lucas has been lying about why he did put Ewoks in Return of the Jedi forever. He said, they're these technologically advanced creatures. No, it's a lot cheaper to make costumes for little people than it is for people bigger than me. You can get
yes,
3
and-
costumes for the price of 1, and that's
right.
why they went with that. And I feel like that's the entire reason that we have Ewoks instead of Wookiees.
That was
And
the
it's
joke,
a lot
right?
cheaper. It's a lot cheaper to have bows and arrows than more bowcasters or blaster rifles, right?
Yeah.
And insert CGI.
Yeah. Although at that time, no such thing. But anyway, yes, I think you're probably right there, Lee. He was making budget cuts even in the way that he wrote the script. Necessity being the mother of invention really worked out well for those guys during the 1980s segment of Star Wars creation. It has not necessarily worked out as well so far here in the Disney Plus era, where we can all look at it and go, "Oh, they did that because they didn't want to spend money on XYZ," So,
But
yeah.
I think going back to our original question though, it doesn't cost them money for dialogue though. That's the thing.
It does cost them money to film people saying
Right.
that dialogue, right?
Correct, but it doesn't cost them nearly as much though to do all the things that you guys were talking about though, right? Like they can cut back on some of the grandiose scenery and stuff like that. Put them in a green screen, give us some conversation pieces that, like I said, can at least fill in some stuff. Like we talked about, it's some exposition. It doesn't
Speaking
cost
from
them
the
that
film
much
side,
money.
it actually is more expensive to do dialogue than action.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
because dialogue basically requires, if you're doing SAG, which Disney is, you've not only got the people that are in scene, but if the person is being done what's called an OTS over the shoulder, a lot of times they contractually have to have a stand-in. So that's another person whose face isn't seen but stands in for the actor. And that's for anybody that's in scene that suddenly is not in scene, or at least a certain level of named actors. You have more crew, you have more sound people. When you're shooting action or when you're doing special effects, that's a couple guys in an office, and that might be for months, but you're at least 6 times as many people for the dialogue scenes. And the DP is generally better. If you're doing action, a lot of times it's a second unit director, which is a cheaper guy. No offense to him, but it's the guys that can get the close-ups that get the notice. It actually is, speaking as the guy that does mostly action, I see a huge difference in the number of people on set when I'm shooting a fight scene versus when I'm doing even the mediocre level of dialogue they give me when I'm shooting.
Well, that's interesting, but it still is unfortunate though. But then that's just where they need to do better job writing. Then is all I'm just saying. So.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to question number 3.
I didn't answer question number 2.
Oh, sorry, Nathan. Sorry. Question number 2 for Nathan. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, because to be clear, Lee, I was saying that the Sith incorporating the truth into their manipulations was my favorite thing from this episode. So we actually agree with that. And my least favorite thing is, not to be a broken record, but yes, Soul not recognizing that was not who he thought it was. I think the moment he recognized it was when he saw Pip. I think he just didn't want to give the game away at that point, and let on that he knew who she was. But I think he recognized, okay, Pip wasn't there, and should have been left on the planet. And that's when he put 2 and 2 together.
Or he just finally noticed that Pip had evil red eyes because she had reprogrammed.
Could be. Yeah, that visual indicator of, yes, this droid is now evil.
Well, Basil was next to him too, so he probably told him too. So
Yeah.
Yeah, see, and I thought it was going to be a plot point that Basil couldn't communicate that because the one person who speaks his language died.
He's dead.
And yet that just didn't become a plot point. So I didn't particularly care for that.
apparently
either.
that was too much dialogue then as
Even alien language dialogue is too expensive to film.
Now, to Derrick's point about Osha staying on the island, I read it as when Qimir said, well, if you want to get out to the ship, you better go right now because high tide's coming in. I read that as, you don't actually have time to get out there at this point. And that was
But
the
that would
reason
make no sense that the ship would get washed away.
No,
No,
but
it's that she
Also, there was
couldn't
like
reach it.
20 feet between the shore and the little isthmus that it was on. Like, it would have been like just walking. It wouldn't have even been
That's
swimming.
what I was laughing too.
well,
It was like,
okay, so there was a rocky, not a
Outcropping?
bridge, but an outcropping.
Promontory.
But that was
Ooh.
at a lower level. So when high tide came, that would have been underwater.
She needed 3
So
minutes to get to the ship. She would have been fine.
If she were to go at that time, high tide would have come up and overtaken her before she got there. Mind you, I do think it was close enough that she could just swim. Details.
This was him doing the whole "I gave you a way out" so that he could once again tempt her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Question number 3. I've been sitting on this since Derrick actually brought it up back in question 1. What changes or connections did you notice about the larger Star Wars galaxy in this episode? For me, it was definitely Darth Qimir cooking the soup, because he was absolutely the dark side version of Yoda here. He's pretending to be something he's not, inept and, almost infirm, basically, earlier in the story. Then she wakes up in his hut, and he's got the food, and she's in his little hovel, and he's like Mr. ascetic monk who is living off the land, yada yada yada, but he's doing it all the evil way, the dark side way. So it's exactly like Luke being in Yoda's hut with the stew and all that stuff on Dagobah in Empire Strikes Back, except of course for the dark side of the Force and not the light side of the Force. I actually loved that about this, expanding the whole Star Wars mythos, and yet also doing the classic Star Wars ring theory. It's like poetry, it rhymes, and so we have the evil version of Yoda here doing the same tactic to try and sway his particular now apprentice or acolyte or whatever we want to call her to the dark side, much the same way that Yoda does his crazy old man who's going to teach you a lesson in The Empire Strikes Back. So yeah, that was my cool connection, and I want to say that it does count as a change, because now we know that there is a dark side answer to Yoda, and also a dark side answer to Dagobah. Although really, this is kind of the dark side answer to Ahch-To, but you get the point. It's a remote planet, very low-tech, lots of more nature stuff instead of technology stuff, and kind of separated from the galaxy at large. Not a lot of people come to this planet. Lee, what changes or connections did you notice from this episode?
For me, this really linked back to one of my favorite of the now Legend series of books, Traitor. And I want to say it was by Karen Travis, but it's the one where Jason Solo was trapped on Coruscant during the Yuuzhan Vong War, and the Sith mistress that eventually finishes corrupting him just kind of has this conversation that gets Jason Solo organically to kind of change sides. And it's kind of the beginning of his downfall. And I always liked that book. There's a great line in the book that said, "Who decides the difference between a flower and a weed?" And it's the gardener. And it's like this weird little ethical choice that they brought into that book that, kind of sparks the philosophy student in me, like, ooh, there's some ambiguity to the morality in this story. And I really did like that. Obviously the Yoda thing. Some people think this is Ahch-To. I think this is Pabu, the planet that the Bad Batch was on this last season. Kind of similar cave systems.
I could see that. Although my thought about that is there isn't like a little colony there. So I think if it was supposed to be the mirror of Pabu, we would at least have like people who live with Darth Qimir, and they're like his serfs.
Well, this is like
we got 100 years for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
so you got some time, and that wasn't an exceptionally big colony, and we saw in Mandalorian how fast that kind of city goes up. So not necessarily very old.
I mean, maybe. I still think it
could just be a different island on the same planet.
It could be. That's true. This is just on the other side of the ocean or whatever. Yeah. Although I do think it is supposed to be that. What is it, Nathan? Baldimnik. Thank you, Baldimnik.
Watch your language, boys. This is a family show.
That's right. Anyway, I think it is supposed to be Baldimnik. Not only because it's an oceanic planet, but it's also historically, or, legends-wise, a great source of cortosis. And we know there are cortosis veins running through those rocks in Qimir's cave, because we see them.
Yeah, and that planet is not canon. This is part of what got decanonized when Disney took over. So this is my answer to question number 3, because I also think this is about Dimnik. This planet was decanonized when Disney took over, but they are bringing lots of stuff in from the legends, with Thrawn and all of that is the big one. Cortosis is being brought in.
Not to mention Cortosis itself, yeah.
Right. So I think that it's very likely that this is about Dimnik, and that we will learn the name of this planet either in the finale or in season 2, when it never comes, because I am increasingly thinking it's not going to happen.
Ooh, wait. What if this is the planet the whatchamacallit, the Inquisitors are on?
Fortress Inquisitus on the shadowy moon Nur. Yeah, I thought about that too.
And enough.
I really don't have any strong arguments against it being just another part of that planet.
Could be Nur, yeah.
So it could be that.
So
that would be kind of cool if it was. All right, Derrick, question number 3.
I was going to say you went with Yoda stew. What about Peru stew? What about Peru? Come on. You know?
Well, that's a fair point, except that it was very much mentor and apprentice going on.
I love how he just leaves it there. It's like a crock pot, He can just set it and forget it.
It's his Star Wars Instapot. I have a Star Wars Instapot, and it works great, by the way.
It only would have been better if he was walking around with a cane and got into a fight with an astromech droid, but we didn't get that. So instead, we got him, trying to seduce her. That. So no, I mean, again, there's not a whole lot to this episode to really go into much. I'm actually more excited when we get to this question for the next episode because they've actually had some people write whole articles on it, so that's been great. Really, as I mentioned here, I mean, I thought the same thing when we came here. I'm like, is this Octo? What are we getting here? But no, it's not. But once, you could see it obviously used to be some type of mining vein, to your guys' point, because you had like this huge security, lock door inside where he was staying at. So, at some point somebody had put it there. I doubt that by himself, not to say that the Knights of Ren, if we ever get to that story on this, who knows, put it there, but he couldn't do it by himself. So it's obviously some type of abandoned vein mine for the Cortosis. So obviously you're expecting at some point there was at least a colony of people on this planet. Again, it could be like a ghost town, right? Where, everything gets sucked up, dried. For the most part, there's still remnants or scraps of Cortosis, enough to make a helmet and a lightsaber and a gauntlet vein or, a little piece of armor for a single person. But this could just be a completely abandoned planet for this most part at this point, because they've already sucked up all the Cortosis over the years of the Old Republic, maybe.
Yeah, totally. It could have been a boom town, and now everything's run dry, so it's all run down and ruins, basically. Yeah, that's an interesting take. All right, cool. We don't really have a question 4 and 5 for Teach/Corrupt because we just didn't think there was that much meat on the bone. And so we will go ahead and take a quick break so you guys can hear about some other great shows here on the FPN. And then we'll come back in the second half of this episode will be our discussion of Star Wars The Acolyte Episode 7, the penultimate episode, Choice.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our Fandom Flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville show, And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Kevin. Okay, well, guys, we'll jump into the penultimate episode here. Yes, I like using the word penultimate. And talk about choice. So, Nathan, a few weeks ago, you definitely talked about how this was going to be the mirror or the second half of Destiny. And I can't remember, did we workshop or brainstorm that choice might be one of the alternate,
We
the
said it
other
would be
half
some
title?
word.
I'm sorry?
What did you say, Derek?
Oh, I was just going to say, we decided that it was going to be, a word that would be somewhat, different, to the opposite of destiny that Nathan was pointing out. So I can't remember what word Nathan picked, though.
My word was free will,
Okay.
which is technically
Which is
two
almost
words.
the same. Yeah. Also 2 words.
It's definitely the idea of having a choice. So,
Yeah,
yay!
totally.
One of my favorite parts of the episode is getting that aspect at least somewhat correct. Although it didn't happen when I thought it was going to happen. But we'll talk about that later. As for my actual favorite part of the episode, Wookiee Jedi fight. We finally get it. Sorry to jump in here and just take over the question, but you guys knew it was coming. I've been wanting to see this Wookiee Jedi fight since we knew that there was a Wookiee Jedi, and getting to see him, Master Kelnaka, going up against Sol and Torben. And it was an interesting fight for me because Sol and Torben definitely don't want to just take out Kelnaka because he's in. You don't want to just cut off his arm. But at the same time, you've got a Wookiee and a Jedi at the same time in the same person. That is a force to be reckoned with and not an easy thing to avoid. And we finally get to figure out where Torben's scars come from. Kind of suspected this was it, but good to see that actually happen.
Yeah, it was pretty great. Lee, what was your favorite part about episode 7? Choice.
I'd be lying if I didn't say it was the same damn thing. I had some problems with it. But it was still pretty fun. I also realized something about the last episode. I just need to put it in there. The first time we see safety rails in Star Wars is with a character named Osha.
Yes.
Can we just acknowledge this?
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Good times.
She just standing there like, oh, what are these? I'm Osha. I should make more of these. Is that the connection they want to make to our universe?
Well, that means that she has to die because she cannot live to implement these.
Yeah, because
fair
they clearly
enough, yeah.
aren't implemented in the
apparently
future.
she doesn't work for the Empire. They just turned her resume around.
Or the Republic.
No. Yeah, the Republic didn't install safety rails either.
Yeah, Phantom Menace, you just land that ship. Well, hover that ship right next to a docking platform and hope you don't fall off.
That's
Or
right.
yeah, the whole
No
circle
safety rails.
thing with Darth Maul and Obi-Wan, right? So
3 miles up in the air, no safety rails at the Naboo reactor core, crazy laser gates that close on top of people, this is just not a worker-friendly universe. But anyway, okay, so my favorite thing about this episode, I will go slightly against type here. I loved seeing an exploration of new Force Witch Night Sister powers, in this case, the brainwashing technique. Because we had obviously seen Torben do the Black Eyes thing, but one, I loved the tempting you, or at least talking to you within your own subconscious, a la X-Men or Star Trek Vulcan mind melds, that kind of thing. So that was cool. So it's nice to see that people can do that with the Force. So, the Jedi mind trick has always been implied that they're talking to you, or at least reading your thoughts. And then now we know that you can have almost a psychic plane that you can stand on and talk to each other and meet within, So that's kind of neat. It was a bit of a modification of the Force time calls that Kylo Ren and Rey did with each other in the sequel trilogy, so that was pretty cool. And then, watching the Night Sisters use it to turn one of the Jedi against the others, I love that as a concept. There's a spell in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition called Crown of Madness that basically lets the bad guy, or one of the player characters, if you're going that way, take over a other character during fights and have them fight their allies. So it was pretty cool to see this idea brought into the Star Wars galaxy. Derrick, what did you like best about this episode?
Well, one thing too, so you could always, if you wanted to go back and argue with that person, Nathan, just remind that person that it took 12 witches to take over Cal Naka's mind. Just remember that too.
So to clarify here, because we were talking before the
recording.
The recording.
Yes.
So for our listeners who have no idea what we're talking about, I was talking with somebody online who was complaining about the fight on the basis of the colors of the lightsabers that the characters had, and how it should have been harder to take over Kelnaka's mind. And yes, one of the points that came up in that discussion, not by me, but by other people, was it took a whole lot of witches, as opposed to one witch who was having a conversation with somebody else and still doing this to Torben.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, what I liked most about this episode was that there was a lot more context that we got to the actual background, right? So, there's been a lot of people that have been griping and complaining about how, and it's okay if that's their opinion and their viewpoint on this, but their feelings are that Star Wars is being ruined by Disney because they're making the Jedi out to be bad guys. And I would say, well, first of all, we've already known they've been bad guys this whole time, because they've been in the sense of following a religion, which again is perfectly fine. But when you start having agendas and taking sides with that religion and dictating who's right and who's wrong based off the things that you deem are right and wrong, is when you have an issue. And again, that's where I'm really enjoying this. But the fact was, it wasn't just the Jedi. Because the way we were getting it in episode 3 initially, it was like, oh, the Jedi are just actually going to take these kids. And at the end, we find out, no, we actually find out that Osha was going to get to go. But, then you have this issue with the Night Sisters, who are now, in a sense, split or having internal issues of one saying, can go, another one saying you can't go, you're going to destroy the family, and it's almost in real time of real issues that families have based off of religions. If somebody's raised in a example, one type of religion, and somebody wants to go off and do something else, or go, be with someone else, or go off and, change to a different religion for whatever reason, they can be shunned from the family. They can be castrated, whatever they need to do to prevent them from doing it. So you actually feel like in this episode that it wasn't just the Jedi. It was actually the Night Sisters as well, along with the Jedi, and the unfortunate circumstances that the Jedi are leading to had they just left them alone. But here we go again with, young Padawans screwing things up. Because they want to save the world or think they're doing right, because again, the way religions teach young people sometimes is not the correct way of respecting others and their choices, and you don't push people to do it. Like he was basically going to push them into doing it, from what Torben was doing, and you find out if you push other people, you're obviously going to push them against you, just like you do in today's political or religious agendas that people have, especially when you've had people with the protests and all that stuff. Nothing to make people hate protesters more than disrupting our normal days of life, right? So and then the fact is that at the end of the episode we get this great whole spiel where Master Indara basically calls them all out on this stuff, but then doesn't do anything. Like she's going to help them cover it up. And to me, that is a perfect case of what I brought up earlier in our conversations on our chit chat, was that this is no different than the whole fight against policemen right now. You can have bad cops, but there's a lot of good cops out there, but they're all going to be rotten cops, at least in my opinion, if the good cops don't stop the bad cops, right? And they just keep covering them up. And that's just the unfortunate circumstance we're in now today. So I thought they did a beautiful job, and that's what I really loved about this episode, was there's a lot of current political, religious, all sorts of current events, and they've turned it into a interwoven Star Wars story. Just like we've gotten plenty of times with some great stuff in previous Star Wars content. Again, let's look at the original trilogy. Look at the first episode 1, or I should say episode 4, and look at all the things that they had there. Look at all the great stuff that we've gotten in Star Trek, the things that I've talked about before when, we've praised, especially with Strange New Worlds, when they've done great things with, episodic Star Trek again. So again, just great stuff, I thought, overall with this episode, with keeping all the current things, but tying it into a Star Wars universe and blending it very well.
I just have one slight correction. The writer in me can't let it go. They probably wouldn't castrate someone to stop them from changing religions, but they might castigate or even excommunicate them. Now, I guess it's possible that might be the threatened punishment.
Metaphorical. Metaphorical.
Yeah. Castigate, I believe, is the word.
Thank you.
I'll double check that. But yes,
I found myself too after. I'm like, why didn't I mean to say castrate? I meant excommunicate.
yes. So anyway, but I agree completely that they do a good job of showing that it's not, not ACAB, if I may take the term, all cops are bastards, but not really in this case, in my opinion. And it is that, of course, that Master Indara initially, this is actually going to be my answer for question 3, but I'll jump ahead real quick. I loved that Master Indara did take a moment to talk to the Jedi Council on Coruscant, come back to the team there on Brendok and say, the Jedi Council told us no, leave those people alone, the children are not to be taken, and we're done with this. But Saul wouldn't let it go. And so that is the situation where we have, they are disagreeing amongst themselves. Even this team of Jedi disagree amongst themselves. Yes, Nathan?
Did she? This is a question I have about this episode. She says she contacted the council, but we never actually saw it. And then later she wants to cover everything up and not go to the council and tell them. And I have to wonder
I have an
why.
absolute reason why she won't tell the council the second time around. She just killed 10, 12 Force Witches with her severing of their connection. She does not want to be responsible for 12
She doesn't
deaths.
want to be responsible for that, but I'm not 100% sure she contacted the council in the first place.
Well, I mean, she told them that she was going to send a message. She sent the message, and then other stuff happened.
That's the question.
Just because we didn't see her push the button on screen, are we to think that she's lying about that? That would be like 3
she
lies.
really
She's
wanted
lying
to-
about a bunch of other stuff.
Well, I mean, it's fair enough.
She
but
only
if
starts
you-
lying after she kills these innocent people on this alien planet.
Yeah, because I mean, to be fair, she
She's
did want
CIA
she wanted the children to test. She was with Saul and one of the children, and went there on that initial thing. But then she said Saul kept pushing it, and she then asked the council, and then they said no, so she moved away from it. So
She didn't want to test the children.
Yeah, that's true. She was like,
told
we
Saul,
can't really test them.
Yeah, basically, you know that this test is pointless because we're not going to take them. But it was a good thing to tell them because it buys us some time to figure out what to do. Which
I think she's so by the book most of the time that we've seen in the other flashback and earlier, that I absolutely believe that she really did contact the council. I was really relieved to see, so we'll just say this is my answer for question 3. I liked the quote-unquote change in that the Jedi finally stuck to one of their own particular dictates. These children are too old to begin the training, or at the very least, we don't have the right to take them from this family because this planet isn't even part of the Republic, as Mother Anastasia reminded us. And they actually told the Jedi in question, no, don't take these children. But then, of course, we have the hubris on the part of Saul to be all, no, this is what the Force wants me to do. God has called me, the Force has called me to take these children from you, and if English is good enough for the Lord Jesus Christ, it's good enough for these children. If the Jedi religion is good enough for all of the children in the Republic, it's good enough for these children. Yes, don't get me started on natives and, taking their kids away.
All right, well, since we're kind of...
Can I jump in?
Go ahead.
Because this actually dovetails into my theory from Revenge of the Jedi. We never see Obi-Wan actually get the orders from the Council to tell Anakin to spy on the Chancellor. And that is the instigating incident that brings that downfall.
So you think maybe Obi-Wan was lying about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've had the theory forever that Obi-Wan is actually the hidden Sith bad guy, because, as I mentioned before, my favorite part of the previous episode is that it mirrors that conversation between Dooku and Obi-Wan. And in the end of the original 6 movies, what happens? But Dooku's goals are realized by the basically grandson or the son of his Padawan's kind of Padawan. So it's like there's a lineage there that kind of goes deep into it, and we never see this important thing where Obi-Wan convinces somebody to commit treason, and then he does it again in Episode 4.
Well, we do have a lot of talk about how Obi-Wan and Yoda are bent on having Luke kill his own father. Mm-hmm. Luke is the one who decides that he shouldn't actually kill his own father. But I dispute that Dooku achieved his goals through Obi-Wan, because Dooku's goal was... Did they not
end up with an independent...
No. They got a new Republic. Dooku didn't like the Republic, they just got a new Republic. I don't follow you.
I think it depends on your own point of view.
Well, of course.
To borrow a phrase from Obi-Wan himself.
I think we lost Lee.
I think we did. He's probably telling me what a moron I am right now. I agree completely. I'm a total moron. But my point is, I'm not sure that I agree that Dooku got his what he wanted out of it. Go ahead, Nathan.
All right. Well, since we're kind of talking about question number 3, connections to the rest of the Star Wars galaxy, and this is kind of germane to what we have been talking about, I thought it was interesting that everybody involved was at fault for what happened in this. So yes. Inara kind of didn't want to take the children, but she also wasn't all that upfront about the reasons they were there. She did tell the witches that, we thought there was no life on this planet, and that's why we're here. But as soon as the witches say, I don't believe that the Jedi wouldn't know that, she doesn't clarify and say, no, that is actually the truth. So her own hubris in saying, I don't want to admit to you that we had no clue you were here, was part of the problem. Soul obviously was part of the problem with saying, I really want this as my Padawan. But that goes back to Indara as well. I think when she was telling Soul, this is why I have a Padawan and you don't, that was just kind of pushing him towards wanting that Padawan even more. And in fact, I think the conversation that she had with him about, I don't give the answers to my Padawan because I want him to figure things out for himself, plays into her not giving the answers to the witches because she wants them to figure things out for themselves. But if she had just been more upfront, things wouldn't have gone that way. Obviously, Torben has some issues with wanting to go home. I don't think I need to explain why he's at fault. Kelnaka didn't overtly do all that much.
He just minded his own business, working on his bike and smelling the flowers.
But he went along with all of it. And I think
he's a good friend.
That goes back to your point about the police officers. And not all cops are bad cops, but when the good cops don't call out the bad cops, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Kelnaka didn't have to slice that elevator platform, but he did. Yep. He just went along with everything that they were doing. So Correct. He's culpable in that respect as well. But then the witches were also at fault for various reasons. Mother Anastasia didn't want to actually give the children a choice. She relented in the end, but she definitely didn't want to give them a choice at the start. Mother Corbill basically egged May on to, hey, if you don't want your
bad
sister to
mother.
leave.
And then she started swinging weapons at the Jedi.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody involved, and the other, the elder, I can't remember her name.
She's voiced by a voice actress, though. Shelby Young. I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah,
Looks like Maz.
She came up
She
with
looks
the
like
whole
Maz, yeah.
plan for have the children lie to the Jedi. So she's culpable in that respect too. If the children had been truthful and honest with the Jedi, a lot of this would have been avoided too. So
Absolutely.
culpability,
Everybody has agendas.
all the way around. Everyone's at fault. It's not just that the Jedi are bad. Everyone in every moment was doing what they thought was best. But
Except tell the truth.
but anytime they didn't tell the truth, it was because they thought it was best not to.
Yeah.
And the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think an alternate title for this episode could have been The Road to Hell.
Or alternate intentions.
Yes. Well, I mean, Mother Anastasia pretty much says the Star Wars version of this, those good intentions of yours are going to get all the Jedi killed one of these days, and she's
And
almost
she is
correct.
right. I mean,
Yeah,
she is absolutely right, because that happens 100 years later.
Yes, yeah.
I mean,
Although all of them
almost
don't
every
die,
episode,
but pretty much wipes
in
out
the
the
series.
order, as it were.
So.
Yeah. Okay, let's circle back around to question 2. What did you dislike the most about this episode? We went out of order just a tiny bit there. For me, it was the fact that when Saul was standing on the edge of the platform near the exploding reactor, and Osha and May are on the alternate platforms with their handrails, he's using the Force to hold both of the bridges up, but for some reason he cannot use the Force to pull both girls to him. Come on, they're like 8! They don't even weigh that much! Anyway, I was dismayed.
Not.
Size matters not indeed, so just pick him up, dude. But, of course, the dark side is on him because he's doing a lot of this selfishly, so perhaps he does not have, first of all, the mental acuity to figure, oh, wait a minute, I could just pull the girls and let the bridges go. But then also perhaps he's not as strongly connected to the light side as he needs to be, or the Force in general, to use it to pull both of them to him at the same time. And for whatever reason, I mean, storyline is the main reason, he can't do it, and that really bugged me. Saul keeps letting me down with his ineptitude of being a Jedi Master, both Force power, both morality, wisdom, and self-control, and I'm just like, you're like the worst Jedi ever, dude. Come on,
You really
man.
let May down too.
Oh, get out. Where's the button to eject a member of the call? Okay. All right. Yes, anyway. Derek, what did you dislike most about this episode?
There wasn't a whole lot. To your point, right? I mean, again, what you would say, you disliked about the episode at the same time would be it's revealing more truths about Saul, who we thought was like, oh, hey, this is a really cool character. We like him. And now we're like, maybe not so much. This guy is no Qui-Gon Jinn, that's for sure.
No, and definitely no Obi-Wan Kenobi. Jeez.
Yeah, so, but here would be the question, though, is do we think Saul becomes the Acolyte? Because that would be where it's going next, it feels like. And somehow May and Osha are both going to die in this next episode. And he's going to be the one at fault. And the only way he could save himself is joining the Knights of Ren. But we'll see. But no, other than that, the one thing I disliked the most about this was really the whole Mother Anastasia scene at the point when the Jedi are standing off with Mother Coral. And May comes in, and Sol is like, oh, it's Osha. But it's not. It's May. So again, he can't recognize who's who. But you would think Mother Anastasia would. And then why does she go into like phantom form? And then they all of a sudden start fighting after like that whole interaction. And maybe I missed something. Maybe I blinked and didn't understand it. But I have no idea why she did what she did, because I don't feel like Sol was going enough close to her to like, oh, like he's going to hurt her. Like, I don't know. Like I said, the whole interaction there for that 10 seconds just seemed really stupid, because we have this standoff. May comes in, she goes into phantom ghost form, and then all of a sudden, she goes back. Again, I have no idea what the whole point of that was.
Yeah, it bugged me a little bit too that Saul was able to kill Mother Anastasia so easily while she was somewhat kind of in shadow form. I'm like, what's the point of shadow form if you can still just be stabbed in the gut with a lightsaber?
He only killed her because she did it, and but then why did she do it? I just don't understand.
So I have
Nathan, what do you got? Yeah.
I have a theory about that, but this is not confirmed, and so I will kind of piggyback on your least favorite thing. I don't like the fact that this was not clear, but this is what I think was happening. There is a force power of teleportation. This is something that Mother Talzin has done. Mother Talzin, when she did it, had green smoke appear around her. So I think that's what Mother Anastasia was trying to do. She was trying to teleport herself and May out of there, but it's not something that is quite instantaneous. So Soul just reacted, stuck the lightsaber in before she actually completed the teleport.
Okay, so she was trying to teleport. Okay, that would make more sense if, I can see what you're saying, because I remember that now that you're saying that with Mother Talzin. Okay,
but
that would make sense.
Nothing in the episode gives us any indication that is what's going on. So I'm still going to put that in as a negative on the episode. I think that's what happens, but only because I'm familiar with it from another Star Wars property. And not exactly a widely known. I know Clone Wars.
She's a Death Seeker now.
Yeah, most people, if you say Clone Wars, they know what Clone Wars is. If you start talking about Mother Talzin, those are some obscure episodes of the Clone Wars.
Good episodes.
Good episodes, absolutely. And people who are as deep into it as us, we know who Mother Talzin is. Most people don't. So,
all right. That's a better. At least that would somewhat make more sense. So it would have been great to have that happen. So we didn't have to have dialogue. So Lee, if you ever watch this episode, we could say it could have just had her doing CGI and did some practicing moves of CGI of her teleporting and I'm trying to, it would have been some dialogue to fill in what she's doing, but that would have made sense.
And I think we're supposed to assume that because we had that bridge that had a bunch of witches on it, and then suddenly they weren't there. I think we were supposed to assume that they teleported, and that's supposed to be kind of the hint that they can teleport. But we didn't see them do it. If we had seen them go into smoke and disappear, and then a quick shot of them reappearing elsewhere, okay, now we know this is teleporting. And would have, screen time wise, only taken a couple of seconds.
And you gotta wonder if that was a scene that got written but somehow got cut, either budget constraints or time constraints or whatever. Because clearly this was done as a production of everything is the blank/blank, but we've had some of the stories get cut into halves.
Right.
I bet this 20 years, 30 years from now, this would make a great behind-the-scenes documentary of all the crap that this team had to go through to make this show.
Yeah.
And all this stuff would have been these side characters or side people interviews would be we were supposed to show this, but this got X'd from such and such exec because we couldn't have the budgetary, or they thought it was pointless and didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I'm going to list as my actual least favorite thing about this episode, and it's something we've talked about with a lot of Disney shows, both Star Wars and Marvel, we always get to the last episode, and there are so many things that it just doesn't make sense that they can tie together all the threads in one final episode. We didn't even talk about the scars that Qimir has and where he got those, and who his master was, who failed him, that caused him.
What planet he's even on?
What planet is he on? All of that, we know nothing about it. I have a theory that Qimir and Soul are actually split the same soul as well, and that this is what they were kind of talking about in this most recent episode. That with Divergence, you can split one soul into two bodies, and I think that may have happened at some point with Soul, in part because his name is Soul. I know it's not spelled the same way, but it seems like it could be it. But they obviously have a connection. They talked about having a connection before. We don't know what that connection is going into the final episode. So we need to figure out what that connection is and resolve it all in one episode. And resolve who his master was. I think it's
Vernestra,
Yeah. Just because
lightsaber whip girl.
it looks like the whip is what would have caused those scars. But we just saw the whip. Like, just in a recent episode. And we only saw it once. And that needs to resolve in the next episode. There's just too much for one episode to resolve everything.
All right, cool. Yay, we have Lee back as we're approaching the question about lightsaber choreography. So,
Perfect timing.
Lee, I'm going to skip question 4 real quick. We'll come back around and just make sure we don't lose you again. So you got to talk to me more about Obi-Wan and Count Dooku some other episode. But question 5. How was that lightsaber fight with Wookiee Jedi? How did it go, Lee? Was that good choreography, bad choreography, somewhere in the middle?
It was good enough, but it was disappointing. They choreographed a big guy the way that a small person understands how a big person moves. And it's clumsy, which a lot of people think is the way big guys move, but it's not always the case. And I was really hoping to see something with some strength, but also some finesse. And we really didn't get that. There's a lot of openings that could have been and should have been exploited. But it was what it was. Now, that said, it's better action than we've seen from a Wookiee so far, because in the original trilogy, as much as we hear about Chewbacca doing stuff, we see him kind of pimp slap somebody and then shoot a couple people, and then he really doesn't do anything else. This is still the best Wookiee action we've had in live action, but still kind of disappointing, and that may be down to Yuna Satomo not being able to do what he needs to do sword-wise. But I always bring that back to the choreographer. If you can't understand how a big guy works, find somebody that can, because there's a whole bunch of us out there. Same problem I had with John Wick 4 with, what's his name, playing the fat guy. It's like, that's not how a fat martial artist moves. That's how you move when you're in a fat suit, buddy. So
Yeah. Now, were you at least somewhat impressed that we had physical action from someone wearing a Wookiee suit? Because, I mean, that's you said, Chewbacca had the Wookiee suit, but he didn't do a lot of movement in it. This was a lot of movement for a guy in a Wookiee suit.
Yeah, and I think that's also part of the reason why he had on his overalls, so that he could do that. It gives a little bit better freedom of motion. Because trust me, as a big guy fighter, I look at my costumes to see what it makes me able to do. So that's definitely a big thing.
What would you have done differently if you had been in the suit swinging the lightsaber at the other Jedi?
I would have used skill and strength. It is possible to have both. For those of your audience that don't know, I actually went to the World Championships in a martial art called Kumdo. Came home 5th. At the time, 6'7", about 260 pounds. A big guy can move. It's not just me going over there and being bigger than anybody ever saw in Korea. It was me actually being able to be good. I had some skill, I had some moves, and if you combine those two, you can have a pretty fearsome thing. Just think Darth Vader in Rogue One. That's some scary movement from a big dude. I actually met the guy, and he's about my size, and was able to do those kind of moves. Let big guys have something other than Hulk smash choreography, and you'll see some really fun stuff. But it's kind of, most choreographers limit their choreography for big guys based on us, stereotypically not being able to move.
Yeah. Cool. All right, great. Well, Nathan, your answer to question 5, was that a good lightsaber fight?
Yes, I loved it. I enjoyed it. I did notice lots of openings that were not taken. My explanation for why they weren't taken is because Torben and Sol don't actually want to hurt Kelnaka. So yes, I've got this perfect opportunity where I could slice the Wookiee in half, but then I've killed my friend. And that is not what the goal is for those two. The goal for those two is to get Kelnaka to snap out of it. So yes, there were absolutely, even I noticed, and I have practiced some martial arts, but I'm by no means an expert, and obviously have not done it for decades at this point. So I'm way out of practice. But even I noticed, yes, there were definite opportunities that were not taken.
By the way, 4 decades this month.
I'm sorry?
Huzzah!
I've been doing it 4 decades this month. I got my first karate lessons as my 7th birthday, and I'm turning 47.
Wow.
Very nice. Yeah. I took karate when I was a teenager, and I am not anymore. We're just going to leave it at that. But I loved seeing a Wookiee in action. I loved seeing the Wookiee strength and being able to pick people up and throw them and smash them against the wall. I love the fact that we had 3 different lightsaber colors. There's a lot of non-canon stuff about what lightsaber colors mean, but in actual Star Wars, what they always mean is what looked best on screen. Or Samuel L. Jackson asked for purple.
Because he's Samuel L. Jackson.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are the only 2 reasons. It looked good on screen and Samuel L. Jackson. And in this case, it looked good to have 3 different lightsaber colors in the same fight. So even when it was a little dark, you could tell, okay, this is this character because they've got this lightsaber.
Yeah, cool. Derrick, what did you think of the lightsaber fight?
I thought it was cool. I mean, I'm just like everybody else. Obviously I don't have the expertise like Lee does. But I thought it was great, especially when they first introduced Kalnaka being mind controlled, because you have like the whole like almost like a silhouette and like the kind of like little bit of fog coming up, like it was a bad guy martial arts old school film, or like kind of like the Wolfman. Coming out of the, that. So I was like, okay, cool. And then he's like, ah, and all that stuff. And then they jump into it. And you could definitely tell, it was one guy was going 100% offense and the other 2 were 100% defense. And basically trying to not get killed. And then you just have, Master Indara come out and just do her whole, Matrix-y Jedi Kung Fu and, basically double taps him and then, tries to break the curse. So, I thought it was cool. Like I said, it would have been cooler if it was a little bit longer. But again, we'll talk about budgetary cuts later.
I'll just echo what everybody else is saying. I really enjoyed watching the fight. It was the ultimate Star Wars fanboy fan fiction moment for me. As a kid growing up in the 80s, my buds and I used to always theorize about how cool it would be if you had a Wookiee that could use the Force. We even had within our own campaign for the old Star Wars RPG, we did the Way of the Invisible Paw, and we had created this idea of a Wookiee martial art, right? But it made it to where none of the Wookiees could become Jedi, because once you envisioned the Force in that manner, you could never see it in the way that the Jedi do. So you do all the physical stuff, pushing and pulling and jumping and landing, but you never do the mental stuff, because that's not how the Way of the Invisible Paw works. Wook Fu. And so, to see somebody do that in live action, it really felt like the person that wrote this scene was a Star Wars fan from the way back, and because they often had the same ideas as me and my buds about, wouldn't this be cool? Because it's almost like Derrick said, it was seeing Kalnaka show up almost like the Wolfman in Star Wars, even though we do actually already have Wolfman in Star Wars. But that's not the point. The point was it felt like fan fiction, and but they did it well enough that it didn't look like a fan film. It was really well done, and I'm happy about it. But let's circle back to question 4 before we wrap up this episode. Guys,
I'll
now
go back
that we've
to question
seen
3. I didn't get to do question 3.
Oh, my bad, Derrick. Go ahead.
Yeah, because the whole big thing on the internet right now for question number 3 is relating to the whole High Republic universe right now is the hyperspace fiasco,
Yes.
or the issue that they have going on in regards to the hyperspace disaster. So really, again, going back to the first book of the Light of the Jedi, which is really the first official public printed piece of the High Republic. Again, this is in a current time, which is obviously a little bit further now, but that we did again see Soul's ship when they were leaving the planet there. It did have to connect to like we talked about, the extra engines to basically go into hyperspace. But in this current timeline, or at least about 100 years earlier to where we're at right now in the High Republic, there is the way they travel in hyperspace is through basically these gates, a la kind of like Cowboy Bebop, if you've seen that, or some other ways where they basically have to enter certain points of hyperspace, and then they can go through those like a highway system. So what ended up happening is there's another faction of bad guys that actually find out a way to actually truly navigate hyperspace on their own way without having to use these hyperspace gate lines, and they were able to use their own basically routes or tunnels or gates as they call them. And what ends up happening is one of these ends up crashing or going into basically a hyper lane route, and a shuttle, a huge ship that's trying to basically be a carrier, passenger carrier, cruise line type deal, ends up crashing into them and basically explodes. And all these pieces diverge into this tunnel, still going in hyperspace, and at some point break through the barrier in a sense, and then get shot off into whatever portion of the universe or space that they're at, which is all on the outside of the outer rim area. And what it basically turns these into is giant balls of asteroid comets that can then basically obliterate planets, right? And what happens for where a lot of these go is if they're small enough where they don't actually destroy a planet, what they actually do is devastate the planet, just like a giant real life meteor it would impact, right? It would crash, and if it kills, millions and millions of people, which actually happens in the first, couple chapters of the book, which is pretty cool. A bunch of people die, but a lot of these places that did survive, or these planets that were still okay from this great divergence, ended up being devastated. And that's where we end up getting this episode. The whole reason that they're even on Bendok to begin with is because this was a planet that survived from one of this hyperspace disasters, and they're trying to understand, because the planet, it's now somewhat thriving, right? Because it initially wasn't. And now it's got plantation and all that stuff, and that's what initially draws them there. And then that's when they discover the Night Sisters. So anyways, that was just a really cool connection. Obviously, a lot of folks, probably because most folks, especially modern Star Wars fans, hate all the new stuff, so they want to joke on it. So they never read the book. I can say it's a good book, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and it really sets it up. And I'm glad that they're continuing to link some of these earlier stories in novels and comic books and putting them into this. But again, without knowing what that was all about, it's an Easter egg, and it's not necessarily one of those ones where we've talked about, and it like exposition would have helped, but at least it was nice where it kind of linked into something that says, oh, this is why the Jedi are here.
Yeah, excellent analysis. I do remember reading some about that online, but since I knew about the hyperspace catastrophe from High Republic, I was all, oh yeah, okay, cool. But yeah, you're right. Most fans that are watching this on Disney Plus probably don't know about the story points of the High Republic. Although I did see some people trying to explain that, with the destruction of the Starlight Station that happens later in that story, it might make sense that Torben, being as young and seemingly cushy, naive lifestyle that he has, he's not aware of the hyperspace catastrophe. He probably is distracted by the destruction of Starlight Station a little while later, or something along those lines. Or maybe, like a lot of essentially college students, because he strikes me as he's the young Padawan, he's the freshman.
Naive in the world, right?
He's
all
naive
he knows
in the world.
Is the temple.
He knows what's happening right in front of his face, and that's about it. So yeah, good, excellent answer to question 3.
I saw some people liken it to Korea and what happened in 1950 to 1953 in North and South Korea. A lot of people of that age have no idea that anything happened in Korea, and that was 70 to 75 years ago. That's about the same time frame that you're talking about with this hyperspace divergence. This did not happen in Torben's lifetime, so it makes sense that he didn't care.
They don't teach it at the Jedi Academy, apparently.
You wouldn't learn such things from a Jedi.
Let me pull an example from myself. I was born in 1984, so if you can do math, you can figure out what I didn't tell you earlier about my age. The fall of the Soviet Union happened within my lifetime, And when we learned about it in high school, I didn't really know or care that much because that all happened when I was 5 and did not care about large geopolitical things.
Yep. Meanwhile, for me, the collapse of the Soviet Union, I was like, oh my gosh, we won! We won! You know, and nowadays people are like, meh, Russia's still a really big problem. And I'm like, yeah, Russia is, but not the USSR. Anyway.
You mean the
all right,
First
that's a
Order?
whole different... That's right, the First Order, baby. It's a
not
whole
the
different
Empire.
podcast. Yes, the evil empire is defeated, but that doesn't mean that evil is defeated. Anyway,
Tell me Putin isn't Fox.
No, he's more
And-
Kylo
and-
because he goes around shirtless.
Ooh. Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I
And he
don't
rides
wanna...
horses.
So moving on to question number 4.
Yeah. So question
Oh, actually,
4.
can I point out one thing to what we just said?
Yeah.
The hyperspace incident and the planet that has all the life where it shouldn't be. Can we just admit they cribbed that from Star Trek?
Yes.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
the Genesis device and
It's the
burn
Genesis
all in
planet.
one.
Yeah.
Be
Totally.
Genesis.
Totally. Yes, exactly.
This is where
the Virgins
Christopher
of the
Lloyd
Force.
should have his cameo, though, not in.
Oh, you're right. Give me Genesis.
Give me Night Sisters.
Give me the virgins.
The virgins. There you go. That's it. All right. Anyway, question 4, and then we'll go on to merchandising. How did May survive, you guys? I mean, we've seen twice now the scene where she and her sister are facing off on the bridges, and May falls, and Saul saves Osha by grabbing her physically, not with the Force. And I was hoping that Choice, now that I know what the title of this episode is, would show us May falls down into the pit, and it looks like she's going to die. But really, Darth Qimir is down at the bottom of the pit, and he saves her, a la Darth Maul and the Night Sisters. But no. Nothing like that happened, so I'm left to wonder, why did she not die?
All going to
Lee,
be shown
you
in
got
the last episode here.
Lee, you got a theory?
I think Mother What's Her Name just smoke monstered her.
Okay.
Once they kind of established that as a method of transportation and defense, you've got your Deus Ex Machina device.
Okay, I can see that. Some sort of other Night Sister presence is there to save her. More
Well,
than
like
Coril
when
or...
they went to say when the one mother just turned into smoke and everyone else kind of disappeared, like that's a power that they have. That's something they can do. And we already have teleportation introduced in the sequel trilogy, so maybe they just have a different understanding of it.
Or heck, maybe at this point in her life, May was trained enough. Because remember, during the confirmation ceremony, May did get the thing on her head before, but her sister didn't. Maybe May instinctually teleported herself. When she was falling through the air, she turned to smoke monster mode and got out of there because she didn't want to die. And didn't necessarily do it, consciously. Maybe it was like a reflex thing now that she has the power. Nathan,
Mother
what do you think?
Anastasia had one more final thing before she died.
Maybe. Nathan?
Could be. I think the teleportation idea is very likely, and that would help explain the what Mother Anastasia was doing with the teleportation. What we're now assuming is the teleportation that Soul stabbed her for. That seems likely. Another possibility is she was just so full of rage and hate. It's a Maul situation. Yeah, she should have died, but her hate kept her alive. Her hate for Kenobi, Soul.
Yeah, or maybe even just her hate for the way things were going with her sister. Some way or another, she was hating on the Jedi, or just the Jedi in general. Jedi,
Yeah, the dark side. Palpatine talks about how it is a pathway to things that many people would consider unnatural, and how Anakin can save his wife using the dark side. And honestly, the dark side in many cases has caused people to survive when they should not have. And that is unnatural. They're not embracing death the way the light side force users are. But that could be the situation here, and that's what I'm going to go with. And gosh, I hope it's explained in the next episode.
Yeah. Derrick, you got anything else you want to
Better
add?
be like a 2-hour episode.
Yes, I hope it is. It needs to be.
Lee, do you speak Arabic? Do you know Arabic, Lee?
Well,
You're on mute
I'm
if
not
you
sure.
get it.
I'm not sure we have Lee
Oh,
accessible at
I
the
speak a
moment.
cursory amount of Arabic, but
Okay.
not enough to say much more than get slapped.
Okay, that's fine. So, because apparently the Arabic term soul means sun, and then Qimir, if you replace the eyes with A for Qamar, means moon. So, because I was trying to figure out, because I'm still sitting on this, Soul and Qimir have to have some relation. So, is it Qimir that was following Soul and just happened to be there, and because or maybe we don't see the rest of the background, that maybe there was a great vergence here at this planet that the Jedi were just on, and Soul goes into a mysterious cave and he gets split into twine. I don't know.
Here's what I think needs to happen. I like your theory. If Sol and Qimir go on a quest and end up at like a giant palace, like a white palace or a white castle, Sol and Qimir go to White Castle, and I would watch this movie.
That somehow Neil Patrick Harris makes a cameo.
Darth Doogie. So
Wow.
we got some sort of stoner comedy within Star Wars. Yeah, good time. Your bong saber, sir. Anyway, all right, cool. So, good times. Anyway, well, all right, that brings us to the end of the discussion of the two episodes. So we'll move on to Derrick's favorite part of the show, which is what Star Wars shirt or merchandise are we manipulating this week? I'll go first because I actually have a brand new Star Wars shirt. Lee's even got a Star Wars shirt. Good times.
Nice.
So I'll let you go first. Lee, since you did the extra effort.
I didn't realize it was. I've got the Tipsy Tauntaun here. So
The Tipsy Tauntaun, yes.
Yeah. Gotta love a drunk snow lizard, right?
Yep.
I just love anytime I can remind people that Tauntauns are actually lizards. Because most people have no concept. They think they're like space kangaroos.
And I love that they have the same dialogue as the Hamburglar. Rabble, 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 rabble.
Rabble, rabble, rabble. All right, anyway, so my new Padawan, Madison, got me a Star Wars shirt at Walmart this week, and not only is it a cool Star Wars shirt, but it's a modification of the first Star Wars Marvel comic cover. You can see that over here, it still says, still just 35 cents. And it's not the cover. It's just a modification of the cover because they've rearranged Vader's face and whatnot. But it's got the Dayglow Star Wars logo. Luke is holding a lightsaber that is not quite the same as what he had in the final film. Leia is, of course, wearing something a lot sexier because that's how you do comics back in the day. Because, the original Star Wars... That's right. The original Star Wars Marvel comic is, of course, done before the first film came out. So the run of comics actually began in 1976. So Marvel was doing stuff without ever having seen the movies, which makes it even more gonzo, bonkers 1970s Dayglow awesomeness. And of course, disco was king at the moment in time, so there were some really interesting things happening with Star Wars Marvel comics. And the best part about this shirt is, Maddie let me know they got it for $1. And I'm like, $1? I'm going to go back and buy another one just to have when this one's dirty and I have to wash it. Anyway, Nathan, what do you got?
Well, I'm not wearing anything so new, but I am wearing my Wolfpack shirt. This is, of course, a tribute to Dave Filoni. He loves the Wolves, and Wolfpack is, of course, the clone troopers that were assigned to Plo Koon, who may or may not be Dave Filoni's favorite Jedi. Hint,
What?
may.
Cool. All right, Derrick, what are you rocking with this week?
So I
Shirt
got
or
one
otherwise?
of my new shirts of many that I've been going through. So
All right, cool. Oh, we have
All right.
Chibi,
Chibi
Mando, and Daimyo Boba Fett from The Mandalorian. And they're jetpacking it and getting ready to fire their weapons at whoever the bad guys
I've been
are.
talking about, twinsies and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
not that all
totally.
Mandalorians are twinsies, but they're bros.
Yeah. But hey, we wouldn't have that group if it wasn't for Jango and, most importantly, Boba in Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. So that was pretty cool. Well, if you guys out there listening to the show want your own cool What a Piece of Junk t-shirt or coffee mug or mouse pad, Derrick's demonstrating the coffee mug here, please head over to tpublic.com and search up Fandom Podcast Network in the user bar, and you can find our merch or merch from any of the other cool Fandom Podcast Network shows, including Blood of Kings, the Highlander show. But you cannot buy Lee's dog, even though
I'm being attacked by a
everybody-
Wookiee Jedi.
Yes, everybody would want to.
Woof.
Woof.
Biting your nose.
Well, anyway, in addition to finding us at tpublic.com, you can find us in other places on the internet. Derrick, why don't you let people know where they can find the show out there on the interwebs?
On the interwebs. So if you want to find us, you can find us on the main fpnet.podbean.com master feed, which is obviously the Podbean app. But you can really find us on any app that streams the podcast, which could be Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play. Also find us over on the YouTube page, which is the FPNet YouTube page. Facebook, you can find us on What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast. You can email, which Scott runs, which is whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com. And the Twitter at What Wars and Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network, both run by Kyle there. And then obviously with any podcast, we love it when you leave reviews. So Nathan, it's your turn this week. Why do we love it when the listeners, Space Junkies, leave us reviews?
Well, the main reason that we love it when people leave us reviews is because it helps other people find our channel. The second reason is because it lets us know what we're doing well and what we could be doing better. So we love those 5-star reviews. Those really help get the word out. But we also love reviews where you let us know what you want to hear. And of course, the real reason we want those reviews is the original reason. We don't want to upset the Wookiee. We found out this week what happens when you upset a Wookiee. And it resulted in 12 dead witches. And a huge scar.
Save the witches.
And
Save the
we have-
witches, give us a 5-star review.
and we have Darth Handsome here. He's pretty much a Wookiee. Don't upset him either.
A trained combat
Absol-
Wookiee, too, at that.
A trained combat
That's right.
Wookiee.
40 years of
Ex-
martial arts experience with the invisible
Excellent.
paw, as Scott called it.
Way of the Invisible Paw, baby. Good times. Well, awesome. Well, if any of those things that we theorized about earlier happen on the ultimate episode, the finale of Season 1 of The Acolyte, you can bet that we'll talk about them next week. But until then, we want to thank you all for listening. Thanks to Lee for joining us for this episode. And remember to please always respect each other and always respect each other's fandom. All right, Nathan, punch it.